Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as part of the Building Digital Communities series. This episode, we are going to focus on building digital communities specifically for first generation college students. And so I'm really excited today to have these special guests with me. I'm Latanya Reese Miles, Director of First Year Experience at UCLA. I also manage a few platforms. One of them is the Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group, and then also on Instagram, Firstgen and Juice. And I am joined today, and I'm going to just go in alphabetical order with Dr. Lamesha Brown down here, Dr. Eve Hudson, and Simone Morales, my great friend and former work colleague. So welcome everybody. And again, next Sunday actually is National First Gen Celebration Day. So really excited to have a particular focus on these communities. And as a way to kick off, I'd like for each of you to, give a little bit longer introduction about yourself. But if you could also say something about when did you realize that you were first gen college? I think we can agree that term has gained a lot of currency in the literature, but it's not a term that's been used for very long, to be honest. So, anyone want to go first? Simone, I'll pick on you then.
I knew that was. I was waiting for it. Yes. So Simone Morales, thank you all for joining us today. I currently work at Stanford University as Associate Dean and Director of First Generation and/or Low Income Programs Office. I formerly used to work with Latanya at UCLA, spearheading First Gen initiatives. And you asked, when did I first realize that I was First Gen, right?
Yeah.
I have a very unique situation, probably very different than everyone else on this call, where I knew I was First Gen. I was a part of a program called AVIT when I was in high school. And I'm originally from Durham, North Carolina. And in AVIT, they took us on campus tours. They helped me with my college applications, filling out FAFSAs, personal statement. I knew I was First Gen. I also got a packet in the mail. I attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And once I accepted once I told them I was gonna, was it SAR? That's what I'm looking for, SAR. Once I told them I was gonna attend the university, they sent me this packet in the mail telling me, "You're first." I was like, thanks for the reminder. And even though I knew I was First Gen, I don't think I felt it, because all of my friends in high school also First Gen, and we all were in AVIT. So we all were like, yeah, we're doing this together. And it was fun and it was cool. And I think that, there's 2 points in my life where my First Gen status was at its all-time heights. And it was, I think it was my junior summer. All of my friends who were not First Gen, they were getting these really awesome internships and jobs. And they kind of had this plan for once they graduated college. And I just, for me, all I knew was I had to graduate. I didn't really understand what was the next step. Like, how do I take this double major in social sciences and turn it into an actual job? And I leaned on a professor. And that was when I realized where my friends were leaning on their parents. I was actually leaning on someone who just kind of extended themselves to me. And then I think the second time I realized I was First Gen was when I was in graduate school. And at this point, yes, I'm an adult and I'm like 25 at the time, but I was the only Black person in my program. I'm in a new state at a new institution, going from semester system to quarter system, and I was struggling. I was like, how does this school not have a First Gen something? Because it was like the small things for me, not knowing about free printing or not knowing about, when I was in undergrad, I knew that we could get the equivalent to food stamps in North Carolina is CalFresh. Like, what is that for me as a graduate student, not having an unpaid internship, right? So just the small things. And it was in that moment that I realized, like, this is what I'm dedicating my life to, because there are students who are like me who, yes, you work in, your field, and then you go to graduate school and you still feel your First Gen status in the classroom, when you write papers, when you present, all of that. So that's about me. That's when I knew I was First Gen. So I'll pass it to Lamesha.
Oh, I just wanted to say before Lamesha goes, how much I always enjoy hearing your story. It's so many nuggets to take away. The importance of, like you said, like the school sort of giving you a heads up or indicator, like we see you, we know you, here's services for you. That's really important. But also appreciate how much you demonstrate like the ongoing need that you have to kind of revisit that identity time and time again. And then, of course, when you're as a working professional too. So thank you. How about you, Lamesha?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So Lamesha Brown, I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am the Director of Advising, Testing, and Career Services at St. Cloud's Technical and Community College. And for me, I had no clue. I was first gen for a very long time. I don't think I realized it until graduate school. So in my master's program, having conversations a little bit more about social identities, not as much as in my doctoral program, but that was the first time where I really understood more about this first gen identity. And for me, kind of, taking that on and realizing like, oh, I am first gen. I am the first one to like navigate higher education. And everything was completely new. Having to figure out, okay, well, how do I do this? Like, what is the next step? And, like Simone said, leaning on folks outside of my family. So leaning on faculty members or leaning on my classmates, folks who may have had parents who had gone to college already and kind of knew how to navigate that already. For me, even more so in my doctoral program, was, with the creation of my platform at Firstgen Docs with my co-founders, got to give them a shout out, Dr. Jason Wallace and Dr. Raven Coakley. That for me really opened it up a lot more. I think in my doctoral program is where I started doing more research, reading a lot more literature about first generation students and coming to understand that more. And the thing, this identity doesn't leave. I'm first gen, even though I've already gone to college. I'm navigating this as a doctoral student, navigating being first gen as a professional as well. And what does that look like to be part of a first generation who might be navigating higher education in another way, since that is my career field. So for me, really, it was graduate school.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear more about the origins of Firstgen Docs. But the other thing you were that came to mind for me as well is Simone, it was really powerful when you said other folks were turning to their parents and you were turning to professors, and Lamesha, you picking up on that thread. One of the things that we may end up talking about too is that students are turning to social media as well. If you're first gen, I know for me, I was also the oldest cousin. And so I was the person that people turned to. And so there was no Google back then, but I certainly would have been using Google to answer everyone else's questions. And I'm sure folks are doing that now. So thanks, Lamesha. It's so good to see you. And then finally, we have Dr. Eve Hudson here. Would you mind introducing yourself, and when did you realize you were first gen?
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, and to everyone who's here. So glad that you are in this space and doing the work that you do where you are. Evangeline is what you see on the screen. Evangeline D. Hudson's the name, and I'm a native of Charlotte, North Carolina. I actually ended up going to Shaw University as an HBCU from an undergrad experience, which is part of the reason that I mentioned is because I didn't realize my first gen identity until after I left. And so I too was in graduate school and actually in my PhD program. There were so many of us who had gone to, this HBCU, and so many students at HBCUs are first generation students. And so it was a common thing that many of us were first. And I knew I was first, but it didn't resonate as anything special. Like, oh, I'm first to go to college, but all of us are, I'm just having a good time. And I was in a very nurturing environment going to an HBCU where I didn't really have to seek out people to help me. They sought me. So I think that was really different as well, where I had, those mothers and aunties and, uncles, in this HBCU environment that was very family oriented, which helped me to sustain. It wasn't until after graduating that the first gen identity really, really kicked in for me, especially being an adult. So when I was in the professional world, even through like grad school, I found a very great community to help me get through that. And similar to you, Dr. Brown, was able to read literature and say, oh, there's really something to this. So what I'm experiencing, I'm not just going crazy. It's not just me making stuff up. Like, I'm thinking, is it because I'm Black, because I went to an HBCU, because I'm a woman, all of these things. And it was like, no, like there's really something to your experiences. But more importantly, stepping into the professional space, like the grown-up space. I'm becoming a director of a program in my dream job, thinking, oh man, I really made it. And all through, college and even grad school, to have this support that just was there for me. But then as an adult, as a grown-up, people forget about you. So for me, I was like, wait a minute, now that I'm grown, do your own thing, take care of yourself. We're not worried about you because you're grown. And there's so much grace for students. Even as a grad student, there was a little bit more grace, but as a professional, there's this saying or this thought that, well, you grown, so you're supposed to know it all. And you don't. And as a first gen, who was I supposed to turn to for that professional career advice when I'm really up against the wall and trying to figure out how to navigate an email or even language to say, or who I talk to about certain things, who I don't talk to. It was just so much. So with that, I ended up creating, which we'll talk about, the Firstgen Lounge, which is a podcast that I host to really address the issue of who do I turn to as a first-gen professional, as an adult, as somebody who's trying to figure out this thing called life and have these conversations now that my safety net is essentially gone. So for me, it was grad school that I learned, but professionalism really drove it home. It really made me say, what is going on here? But, to say the least, glad that such spaces exist now, creating what I didn't see.
I love it. I wrote it down that you talked about the grown-up space, right? And we'll dig into that, just like you said. Simone, I'm going to start with you, though, because of the success you've had building platforms for primarily undergrads, but not exclusively. And I hope you talk a little bit about that, too. But what's it like to start a digital community? And you've done it at two different types of institutions. If there are any observations you have about that, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, it's definitely very different when you're looking at public versus private institutions. So, at UCLA, it took some time. I was there for 4 years in the role under LT Latanya, as it shows on the screen, and I wanted to start it very early, but I couldn't manage it. I couldn't do it. And, the reality of it is I'm in a millennial generation where I'm still a part of the people who had none of these platforms. And then we got these platforms, but we're not necessarily attached to these platforms, right? And then the generation after me, this is all they know. So this is what they're always ready and able to have the information at their fingertips. So when we talk about in higher education, like meeting students where they are, like that's the definition of meeting students where they are. They're on their phones, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. They're not on Facebook anymore. That's really sad because I enjoy Facebook, but they are on all these other platforms. And, one of the things that I noticed when we first started, it really is Instagram. I think Instagram is the largest platform right now. Like Twitter, yes, but I think Instagram, there's so much more you can do with Instagram on both ends of the spectrum. Like as a professional, you can collect data, you can look at the analytics, you can see your reach, which is the biggest piece. Like I'm sharing this, but how many of the students in this population are actually receiving this information? And on the student end, they can save it, they can go back and view it, they can share it with a friend. And it's so much more accessible than emails. And it doesn't stop the emails, right? Like, 'cause there's still some students who prefer to have in their email, but it's an alternative way to reach them. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that, especially during this pandemic, because students are always on their computers, yes, they're still on their phones, but instead of them sending an email, they're more likely to send a DM if they think they're going to get a faster response. And I know for some people, they're like, well, a DM? Like, absolutely. Like, students will ask you everything from, I'll speak on behalf of Stanford versus UCLA now. We had originally made the decision to not bring students back, and then we decided, we said we were going to bring them back, and then we said we're not going to bring them back, but it all happened within like a week and a half before school was going to start. So financial aid was really backed up, having to revise, applications, packages. And, on the professional front, I know all the things that's happening in the deadlines. The students are panicking because they haven't received aid. So students who don't want to bombard financial aid are finding DMs as a way to communicate with staff about, do you know the timeline? Do you know when I can get a refund? I have bills that need to be paid. And when we think about the needs of our students during the pandemic, financial aid is really what's pulling them through for a lot of students. Their jobs, work study jobs aren't as accessible anymore. So just different platforms from Handshake to we advertise on social media when we're hiring. So, I think when I think about the differences, UCLA's platform started off with 4 followers, and I think now they're almost close to 3,000. And that's a good chunk of the population that's following that Instagram and asking questions and staying connected. It's also a way to highlight people who look like us. I know all of us kind of shared, I'll speak for myself. I always say the first gen identity is an invisible identity. You walk into a room, you don't know who's first gen, and it just happens via conversation. Someone says something, you're like, you experienced that too? Are you first gen? And then there's a spark. And I think, using social media is a way to display and kind of break that up of, let me highlight some faculty for you. Let me highlight some of your support service staff for you. Let me highlight some of your students, your peers, so you can see like, oh my gosh, I have a class with this person. I saw you're also first gen. Did you understand what the professor was saying? Maybe we can come together and ask questions to figure out how to get them to break it down. So, I think the same challenges that I saw at the public school are also happening in private spaces as well. But I think without a doubt, social media is a great digital space to be in right now to reach students. And I don't see that changing for at least another good 3 years. So if I have any advice, the advice is you should start doing that. I'm pretty sure if you did a poll and you asked your students, they would want something from you in a digital space.
Simone, I always consider you an amazing social media strategist. And I know you've actually consulted with people who've been really nervous about starting something and launching. Is there like a post or any kind of special thing that you did that stands out that you're particularly proud of? Or just a standout one?
I would say right before I left UCLA, I was working with the grad interns in our office to do IGTV. So I talked about there's just so many ways to share information. And I saw they didn't post it until after I left. So when I got to Stanford, I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to do this. We were able to get one of our CAPS counselors at Stanford to do a personalized video talking about support services and the needs of, we use the term FLY at Stanford, which stands for First Generation and Low Income students, their needs and who is there to support them in CAPS. And when we think about us as individuals, what speaks to us is when someone is speaking directly to you and for you, and this is the platform that you're coming to look at it on. And I thought that was super cool, just even explaining, how much social media presence mean, and then to have a doctor, a CAPS counselor say, yes, I will make this video and I will make it in a platform way so you can post it on your IGTV. I think that was probably one of the coolest things that I've seen. And I know that the graduate students over at UCLA were able to talk about how to apply to graduate school, and they just recorded themselves talking, and then they started answering questions, and they took an hour-long recording and chopped it up into individual questions and just kind of used that as a way to share out information. So I think, that's one of my things that I'm most proud of, is just being able to take these large topics and to be able to condense it down in a 5 to 10 minute video in a time where we can't actually hold a lot of programs to create face-to-face interactions.
That's a good segue when you're talking about grad students. But one of the things I will say that I learned from you is just all the different tools that are available to you. It's not just a post, the videos and how interactive your use of Insta Story is just amazing and top notch. So I often tell people who are nervous about starting it is find you a good student, because they know what they're doing, but you do have to be intentional with them, right? And I've seen you storyboard, kind of lay out like certain things. So that's critical. Thanks, Simone. Let's bring Lamesha into this because you talked about really sort of discovering your first-gen identity and having your epiphany during graduate school. Can you tell us more about the origin of first-gen docs and what's unique about being a first-gen graduate student or doctoral student?
So the origins for Firstgen Docs, it actually came about as we were getting ready for, conference proposal season. And, the conversations had came up in class before. I think some of us just kind of recognizing like, oh, wait, you're first gen, I'm first gen too, and connecting on some of those similar experiences that we were having as doctoral students, some of those difficulties, some of that imposter phenomenon, all of these things. And oftentimes, like Simone said, it's an invisible identity. So I don't know who's first gen and who isn't, but there's something that this one person said that we connected with. So we're like, okay. So anyway, we're getting ready for conference proposal season. I had the idea. I think I took it to Raven first, like, hey, what do you think about if we did like a proposal about first generation doctoral students' experiences? And she's like, okay, cool. So I'm like, all right, well, what about bringing Jason in? So we had the conversation with him. He's like, yeah. So we're like, okay, we want to do a Twitter chat to just kind of invite other first generation doctoral students to talk about their experiences. And that's how it started. Had that one chat, what was it? June of 2017. And then a couple of months later, we had another one and we just kept doing our monthly Twitter chats and the platform grew. Like we had no clue that it was gonna grow like that. I think in our mind, we're thinking, okay, we're just gonna do this for this conference, proposal. We got accepted, like, okay. But when we saw how people engaged with us in that first chat and how we saw, wait, this is a space that's needed there. There's not a lot of people talking about first gen doctoral students specifically and that experience and learning more about what's happening with people. So it just continued to grow and kept going. And so, we're always really amazed to see how many people engage each month. We do our monthly Twitter chats during the semester. We always take breaks in the summertime, and we encourage folks, hey, take breaks. We get it. Being a doctoral student is this really ever-going process until you're done when you graduate. But we encourage people to take breaks. Over time, it advanced to us doing writing retreats, knowing that, writing is an extremely important part of the doctoral experience. And for some people, they don't really have other people that they can connect with. Maybe they are the only first gen person in their program, or maybe they are Black in first gen or a person of color in first gen, and they don't really have a community wherever they're at. So we like, hey, let's start doing these monthly writing retreats. We were doing a little bit of blogging, just a tad bit. We haven't gotten into some other pieces, but yeah, it's been amazing for us to be able to have this experience and to really center first generation doctoral students. Some of the uniqueness about first gen doc students, the thing is, people think that just because you're a doctoral student and you've navigated higher education that you know exactly what you're doing. And I do want to explicitly state, like, first gen students have what they need. They have exactly what they need to be successful. They have various forms of capital that help them along the process, right? Like, we're first generation. We haven't seen anyone else do it, but we're able to aspire to something that we haven't seen anyone in our families do before us. And we learn how to navigate. It's just what we have to do. And especially when you think about the intersections of identities, like, the three of us, we're all Black, the three co-creators of Firstgen Doc. So you think about Black people, we've had to navigate, period. And so that's what we learn how to do. But we need help. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. There are some things that you come into graduate education you might not fully understand. So, there's literature that talks about a lot of first generation college students attend universities that are bachelor's degree granting. So maybe you haven't been at an institution where research was a part of an experience for you, right? Undergraduate research opportunities. I never knew that was a thing. And I went to a university that was a research institution. And so being a doctoral student and learning about research for the very first time and having to navigate this process that I've never done before and dealing with imposter phenomenon the whole way through and questioning, can I really do this? I considered leaving school my first year because I'm like, okay, all of these classes, all of this reading, like, I don't know if I can do this. I know how to work. I've worked since I was 15, so I could work a job. Like, let me quit school and go back to work. But being able to find other people who share similar identities and we're all like, hey, no, we can do this. And we're encouraging each other and we're creating space for ourselves and for other people is what this is all about. But, it's that navigation piece. I need to know the things that I don't know, right? Even something as simple as regalia, how much that costs. Like, my mind was blown, okay? $1,000 for the real nice one? Okay.
I still don't have mine to this day.
So it's just all of those things, or the importance of conference attendance and presenting your research or whatever as a means of preparing for life after your doctoral program, preparing for your career, getting out there into the field. All of these things are important that a lot of times we don't know coming in. Oh, okay, so not only do I have to do this coursework and I need to write a dissertation, though I don't know what all that entails, I also need to go to conferences that are not free, right? So now I need more money. So, and then if you think of like social class and even how that intersects, there's just a lot about that doctoral education process. But I think a lot of the things that we encounter as doctoral first-gen doc students is very similar to what we encountered as undergraduate students. We still need a little bit of assistance navigating. We still don't know what we don't know. So it really is important for us to have faculty members who are aware of the identities of their students, who are aware of some of those experiences and can help guide us along the way.
Yeah. One more question, because you all, I encountered you all via Twitter, and I've had a faculty member say to me specifically that they were scared of Twitter, right? Because they just didn't know how to behave. There's a culture to Twitter. What are you finding particularly, how do you build community using Twitter as a platform?
Yeah, for us, it's been a team effort. So out of the three of us, I say I'm the least tech savvy. I think Jason would probably say he's next, but like we all, and Raven is like Twitter. She's so great with Twitter. But it's a team effort for us to engage. And so, you have to create your page, you create your hashtags, you get out there and you post. I think, letting people see who you are, being present, being consistent, that's how you are able to build that community, and then figuring out what people need. There have been times where we've asked like, hey, what do y'all want to talk about? Like what's going on right now, or even just us thinking about some of our own personal experiences. What is it that people need to know? We've had chats about qualitative research, about quantitative research, about getting ready for, graduate school for those aspiring first-gen docs. We've had all kinds of chats about different topics, kind of based on what we know the experiences of first-generation doc students. And then, of course, asking people, what is it that you want to talk about? it's just really getting out there and tweeting, getting out there and posting, and being consistent with that.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then Eve, I want to hear of all the tools that are available out there, Instagram, podcasts, blogs, Twitter. Why a podcast? How is a podcast serving the needs that you have for Firstgen Lounge?
One thing I find is that it's fairly universal and it's accessible. And I didn't even have this concept or thought of it when I actually first started, because my first year of podcasting was about finding your purpose. And I had this idea about a year later when I was in a situation thinking about, what does this mean for me to be first gen and professional and now an entrepreneur? Let me interview people, have a conversation, and let me utilize this podcast to do that. I knew that podcasts were one of the fastest growing communication mediums. I'm also like a mass comm background. So I'm finally using all my degrees. And I was like, hey, I always wanted a radio show. I finally got my show. But it was a natural fit. People who generally listen to podcasts are those who are educated. It was an opportunity to create a space, not just for Black people, for women, and for first gens. There was nothing there, but this podcast was multifaceted. So for example, you can go, and if you're sitting in a library and you're a student, you can download all the shows and have them for offline and listen to them later if you don't have internet at home. So when I started thinking about it, I'm like, man, would I tell a college president or ask them to watch a YouTube or listen to a podcast while they're running at the gym? So starting to think about the many ways that people could access content and then really tune into these conversations, the podcast made sense, but it was also a very natural fit for me. I'm not a fan of like doing videos. I cringe at them, but I'm really good at talking. And I've always like been behind a mic. So I took my skills and my interest and, things that I was good at to build a community to where I could sit this in front of you, and be it that it's Spotify where you're already listening to music, or if you already have an iPhone, you can just download it or just go to a website. There's so many ways to access a podcast. And even if I just wanted to embed it on a website or just put it in an email, I could do so many things with it. And so the podcast became a very natural thing, even in growing the community, so that as people began to learn more about the Firstgen Lounge, it's very easy for a 45-year-old white male who doesn't know anything about Firstgen to tune in, as well as an 18-year-old college student who saw something on Instagram. So even how you can take it and use it to put it in multiple spaces to get in front of multiple people was something that I found as a strength. And then even the price point or the cost for entry to do a podcast versus something like a YouTube video or just videos in general, and the time commitment, just being able to just draw people into it, to say an interview versus a live interview. Sometimes the response is a bit different. And so with that, as I again continue to grow through podcasting and getting to know more about my audience and who was actually listening, it's cross-generational, age, class, race, gender, you name it. Podcast is kind of the it thing. The thing is just getting people to stay tuned into it, making the investment to show up and do a show every single week. And then with me being more interview based, it's also thinking about being strategic about who you ask to come onto the show and trying to navigate schedules and timing. But it's also one of those things that serves as a really great space and just a easy listen. If I'm at the gym, I can listen to the podcast. If I'm in the car, I can listen to a podcast and just turn off something else. And I can always catch up so I'm not missing it. I can always go back, and some people will start from number one and go all the way through. So there's this curation of stories of people that I can find a topic that's relatable, and I don't have to listen to it all, but I can get what I need and then also contact those people. So the podcast really just made a lot of sense for me and continues to make sense and will continue to make sense, candidly, because podcasts are still the most rapid growing communication tool or, platform that there is out there.
And I love how you also use LinkedIn as well to promote your your latest podcast, which is another way of building community of like tagging people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she interviewed James. I got to make sure I listen to that one. But you also have a global reach, because can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you even find that out, and what does that mean to you?
Now that's been the mind-blowing part. Because when I started this, it was just to have conversations with others who are first gen. And so as of late, I've reached about 63 countries, which, you know, again, it's just, I think word of mouth is how it happens. And then I had a record-breaking download night just this past Thursday where I had 10,000 downloads in a night. So something's happening, right? But for me, it's been a very natural progression of things. And you'll say, well, this global reach, how did it happen? I think we tend to think only about ourselves and our nation, our states, our schools, but being Firstgen is everywhere. And so I think it started with somebody tuning in from Jamaica, then from Mexico, and then having people from, you know, different backgrounds on the show with different connections and people who are tuned into their work. Having LinkedIn is my favorite social media platform, and then IG. So finding people who find people who tune in, who tell somebody, being listed in podcast directories, being in Facebook groups, being on mailing lists. So when people are passing the word, it's literally how I believe it's spread. And I say how I believe because I've never been to India or the Philippines or Africa, but folks are listening. Even so much so that there are a group of budding Firstgen groups in the UK, at York University and Cambridge and Oxford, London School of Socioeconomics, who have all caught wind of my podcast, and so much so that they invited me in for a conversation and was like, America's really ahead of the curve in this Firstgen work, but we're trying to catch up and do it too, because people don't realize always that the Firstgenness is something that's worth talking about until we realize what students are or are not graduating and what students are doing well and why. And this Firstgen thing is just really taken off in the past, I want to say 3.5, 4 years that I've seen it. And it's not a trend, it's an actual filling the gap thing. So how does it feel? Amazing. It feels crazy. It feels phenomenal. It feels, not say crazy, not like, you know, in a disrespectful way, but it's just mind blowing most of the time because I'm just the Firstgen kid raised by the single mother who's made like good friends literally across the seas. And I'm making these regular connections and having regular conversations, but it's all rooted in this invisible identity, which I love how the both of you put it. It connects us across gender and race and class and interest and, you know, majors and entrepreneurs and professors. It's just this connecting thing that I had hoped for. So it's a dream realized in a way that I didn't see it happening. But even to that point, knowing that the work is global and it creates opportunities for us, even as Americans who are kind of leading this Firstgen conversation, to do more to partner and to do more to connect with people literally everywhere, to support students and to see them thrive. I think about study abroad. What would it be to create a Firstgen study abroad program with 2 Firstgen programs? Like, that's possible. I'm seeing the work, you know, I'm seeing people do it, and we just have to come together in that. But the podcast has opened my eyes to having friends in different spaces. And I'm able to reach out and say, hey, would you do an interview to someone who may be in France? But again, we're Firstgen and we connect off of that. And then we talk about Black Lives Mattering and how it's affecting both of us in different countries, or how we are, you know, experiencing things as women or Black women in different countries. And it's just been like, oh, this was just the North Carolina, South Carolina thing. So I thought then California was on the map, then who's in Arizona? And so now it's like to be that resource as well, to not just empower people, but to also, we've been jokingly saying the Firstgen plug. So connecting people to other resources and other people who are doing Firstgen things. It feels like just unreal most days, but I'm grateful for it.
Gosh, I'm loving it so much. I'm so proud of you. So each of you had been involved in a thriving social media platform before this year, before COVID and quarantine. But I'm curious, and I'd love to hear from each of you for a bit. What have you noticed since remote learning, the remote environment, whether it's in terms of engagement or in terms of like your content? So anyone want to go first?
I can just go ahead and say, because I noticed that recently, right, with the downloads, people are really gravitating toward the digital stuff a lot more. And I believe giving us a lot more recognition that they probably missed before because we were digital and they didn't necessarily have a need for us. Now, that's not to be funny or, again, disrespectful, but when you're thinking about people who are local or friends of friends who are doing things, you can bring them to campus, then you don't really take, you know, sometimes the liberty to look other places for resources. So now I think with the digital push, that we are finally like being recognized, but also being pulled into the conversations that we've already been having in like small spaces, that's a good way to say it. But what I also find is that there's also like a massive healing that's happening with Firstgens, to where there's deeper connections where people are showing up for these digital things to make friends, to be a part of a community, and to share their experiences in ways that they didn't think to do before because it wasn't an option. But now, for example, to jump on this Firstgen, Empowering Firstgen group social, right? When else would we have thought about coming together to have a conversation, except for now in a digital space where it's a common, normal thing? So I think for those, like, myself and Dr. Brown and Simone, that it's a space where, even Firstgen and Juice, with you, LT, it's a space where finally people are giving us a second look, because they've also slowed down a little bit and have the time to explore the internet a little bit more and say, where has this been? How long this been around for? How long? I didn't even know. Because, your head's down and you're trying to work in your environment, you probably don't see it. So fortunately, we were already ahead of the curve, and now we've adapted so that we can more freely and more openly welcome people to be served in what we're doing.
What do you say? And let me say, yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, just piggybacking off of that, I think because people are paying a lot more attention to their own self-care, especially with everything happening in the world, right? People were forced to slow down. People are spending more time inside of their homes or inside of somewhere, and you're not out and about in the same way some folks are. A lot of folks aren't, out and about in the same way. So really it is just learning more about, well, what's out there? What are people doing? And, one of our first chats earlier this year with COVID-19 was to talk about it. We need to check on people and see how they're doing with this social distancing or physical distancing. And so we've incorporated that into our chats, and just acknowledging what's happening in the world and, saying, hey, are you okay? So that's typically how we do, is incorporate it into the chat. You can't ignore what's going on in the world. This is a great opportunity to engage people in conversations and to acknowledge what's happening, because it's impacting all of us.
And how about you, Simone?
I don't think I have much to add after the two of them. I mean, yeah, I think one of the things that Eve said that really stood out was people trying to find community. And I think that's very much so really true for like incoming freshmen and transfer students really struggling, hoping to gain this experience that, their peers, people who are at campus and they know what campus is like when they're physically there, they know what to expect to return back to. And those incoming frosh are really struggling to find friends, build community. And I'll even say, I think first-gen professionals are struggling, like having to be home and be in these spaces. I'll speak for myself. I flew home to North Carolina from California to be with my family, and I hadn't seen my family in about 10, 11 months. And, and I'm still working and I'm on a different time zone, but the constant reminders of like, you wash your hands in the bathroom and not the kitchen because the sink is right here and I'm on an important Zoom call. And, it's a little challenging it's being first gen. I think the professionals have even entered into a space where they are looking to connect. And my associate director actually started doing what we call working sessions, where it's just time blocked off on people's calendars and people just log on to Zoom to be in community. That means some music playing in the background. And if you want to chat, you can chat, but there's no formal meeting spaces. We all come to work almost. And everyone's kind of craving that. They're craving to have this connection with people in their jobs, in the classrooms, just in their usual spaces. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen from the pandemic as far as like impacting identity and social media too. I don't remember who said it. It's been a lot of sharing, a lot of Twitter sharing that's been brought over to Instagram, like lots of tweets around their stories and professors in the classrooms and, what it means for them to be here and then not have this experience. So storytelling has been a very big thing that I've seen too over the past few months.
Whew, trying to get some of this down. And I'll share a little bit too, because I've noticed some shifts with our Facebook group, the empowering page. So funny enough, Simone, we're getting a lot of students, a lot of undergrads joining that group. And so that's in a good way sort of shifted. I just have to be like extra mindful of them and making sure that some of the questions that I pose include them, just check-ins. It's just simple check-ins. How are y'all feeling right now? So we're seeing a big intake on Facebook, which kind of goes against what a lot of people are thinking. I kind of think our students are everywhere. They're on like whatever platform for different reasons. And then today, some of you may know Sarah Goldrick Rab, a professor from Temple University. She does a lot with Real College. She's a sociologist. So just today she invited, I just noticed like, who are all these people that are coming into the group? College presidents. So she just invited Keith Curry from Compton College, Russell Lowry Hart. And so it'll be interesting to see how their presence now may shift in that group too. But it's also showing that, there's a lot of value in that group. Simone, I think you were hitting on this, but I just want to make sure I ask this question in case there's a component anyone else wants to add. When people, though, are building communities for first generation students, what do you think they should take into consideration? Acknowledging there's so many different platforms, but if there's something you would want to tell someone as they're thinking about it, and that's a question for any of you. Just want to.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that too. I was hoping you were going to ask me that. Ask them what they want. Like, you don't want someone telling you what they think you want. Like, no, ask them what they want. When I tell you, they will tell you. They will tell you. So just ask them. There's so many ways. I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, LT, when it was all this fuss about like, well, graduate students and first-year graduate students, we don't know what they need. And then LT and I were like, a focus group. We could just ask them, what are your needs? Like, if you could dream big, what would it be? What are things that are realistic? And then just build from that, because the reality of it is you don't know what you don't know, but you do have a sense of what you need and you may not know how to get it. And that's like the starting point. The students will tell you like, I don't know where to go to fill out my taxes, something as small as that, right? But if there's an office on campus that someone is being paid to do that job, then that's an easy connection for you to make. And that can make the world of a difference for a student. So same with faculty. I've done that with faculty too, trying to get faculty initiatives, asking them like, what do they want? What do they need? What do they anticipate their level of involvement is? So when it comes to digital spaces, you can ask students, you can do a poll. Realistically, we're also using email. So you could do a poll to see what mediums they're on the most. And if there's two that are sticking out to you, figure out how can you cater to that. So yeah, that's my biggest advice. And then just go for it. I know it's like intimidating because there's going to be presidents and college vice chancellors probably monitoring what you post, but they're checking because they need to know the information too. And I think that's something that I learned over time was they were watching our social media, but it was because some of the things that we were sharing, they also wanted to highlight. So you are the people that are doing the groundwork. So what you're doing is great. Don't stop doing that. Just be prepared to share that information because other people like me and LT and Lamesha and Eve, we're all looking at what other institutions, colleagues, entrepreneurs are posting because we're trying to be better at our craft. So just don't be afraid to put it out there or to ask the population what they need.
Just two quick things. One, so Simone, it was just a year ago that you started the Instagram, right? For UCLA First Ago?
Yeah, it was like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's not very old, but and so she laid the groundwork for it. And our most shared and saved post is how to file for unemployment. It's just speaking right to the need. Now that came this summer. And then just real quick, I was going through Instagram today, and Biola University, private Christian school, they're having Firstgen chapel. I was like, oh my God, but that's speaking to their students. And so they're encouraging people to share, and then and doing it in a space that's specific for their needs. I love it. Anybody else want to add to that though?
I would say focus on what you focus on, like find that thing that you're good at as a community, as an institution, whatever that looks like, and do that and be okay with that one thing. And find really like just that space. And Simone's saying, talking to your group and figure out what they want, because you don't have to do a podcast and an Instagram and a LinkedIn and a Facebook group to be successful in what you're doing. I learned the hard way. So take it from somebody who knows. Doing everything is great, but where do you really want to show up and make an impact? For some of you, that may be just being on a LinkedIn space and sharing professional resources for your students and having a group or a page. For others, it may be just an internal podcast where you're sharing updates and information. For other people, it might be a blog, because people still enjoy reading. So people will read, and to have, again, that those resources that are evergreen and to be able to use over and over again. But find your thing, but also figure out first as a team what you want to offer, and also ask in that focus group what resonates most and roll with that. Because you'll find more success doing one thing or maybe even two things really, really well than doing multiple things and stuff. Someone's like, well, what happened to the group? Well, we just don't have time, but that wasn't working out. But if they're showing up on, Instagram and doing the IG stories, or if they're showing up on LinkedIn and, sharing with people and tagging folks, getting information, those things are all really important to know, but you'll be great either way.
So we're just one final question, and it has to do with where do you draw your sources of inspiration as you're on your platforms? And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this particular conversation is because each one of you has inspired me in some way in what I do, whether it's very directly, like working with so closely with Simone, or even I have not even been physically in the same place at the same time ever, but Eve, you gave me very specific advice about do what you do. Like when it came to Firstgen and Juice, you're like, that is your lane, stick with it. The pop culture, that's hot. I think that was a quote that came from you directly. And I was like, yeah, but I want to be a center. And you're like, no, you're a 3-point shooter. Shoot your 3-point shots. And then Lamesha, I think you're a really great example of how you may not even know that you're influencing someone. And so I've always just been, since I found it, admiring Firstgen docs and been wanting to have this type of conversation. So I wanted to give you all some time to just let us know who inspires you, sort of what keeps you going when it comes to the digital media, the social media space.
I'll start. And this isn't to be cheesy, it is so for real. LT Reese Miles, Firstgen and Juice. And here's why. It was one of the first Firstgen platforms that I even saw that was developing a couple of years ago, when it was just, the fly t-shirts. And I was like, oh, what's this? Because I was looking to see what was out there, what was happening. But then as you begin to the pop culture thing, and then meeting you, those said we've never been in the same space, but meeting you and connecting with you, you've always been a resource. So when I think about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up for my community, 1, blaze your own trail, and 2, be a resource. And so with that in mind, how can I work with other Firstgens and do this? Because through the podcast, it's a lot of networking that's happening. And I'm always able to say, because of an interview, oh, talk to that person. Oh, connect with that person. But even that, and then thinking about how you put the pop culture spin on Firstgen, that totally blew me. Because what you showed us everyday common Firstgen, was that we can aspire to something more, because there are people who are out there doing things that we want to do, and they come from backgrounds just like us. And for me, when I thought about creating the Firstgen Lounge and what it would look like to have doctors and lawyers and professors and teachers and engineers, so many people from so many walks of life, it essentially is doing the same thing on the for lack of better words, everyday folk level, to where I can see somebody who is accessible and talk to them about my first genness and hear their story and know, man, that happened to me too. Man, that did it for me too. But I'll definitely give you that, because you have been blazing the trail for people like us, and in ways that even the Empowering First Gen group, I would have never thought to do that. But again, it's having the time and space to show up and create community. When you think about what you want to do, I drew inspiration from that. And I would also say another person is this guy named James Wedmore, who was an online business expert, because I knew in some part of what I was doing, the online component would be really strong in that. But he really forces me to think about my mindset. As a first gen, I've had to do so much mindset work to start to believe in my worthiness and my ability to bring in so much money, or to have a platform that would have so much reach, because I'm used to I'm blazing the trail. Can I do it? And his thing is, yes, you can do it. So blending those things, I'm thinking about what it means to be first gen and to make a difference. And to, like Simone said earlier, and when she said, I was like, man, I feel that committing my life to doing this, when there's nobody else doing it and you find that need in that space, you step into it and you do it, just like with Black First Gen, and you commit yourself to it to be able to know one day somebody will be better because of it. And I get that, from what you've done, and even from James. So, yeah.
So for me, two platforms that inspired me in the very beginning. Side Assistant. Side Assistant was co-founded by Dr. Brittany Williams and Dr. Joan Collier. They are also first gen docs, but they were in my program and they're friends. And so they created Side Assistant before, first gen docs, but being able to see like, oh, okay, so this is how it goes. Like, they were doing the Twitter chats. Also, Dr. Brittany Williams is one of 5 co-founders for Sister PhD. And so really both of those platforms, and, they created websites and had blogs and all of these things. And I'm just like, oh, wow, like they created community, created these platforms to center Black women. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So those were 2 platforms that inspired me and inspired First Gen Docs when we first began.
This theme of Black people showing their greatness. Anything? Simone, do you have a visitor in the house?
Yes, and it scared me. So y'all probably saw me. Trying to hold my composure until I saw what it was. It's a really big fly. I haven't been in the country in so long. I don't know what it is. So still a little freaked out. And I don't know where it is, somewhere behind my head. So I think my digital presence around supporting first gen students is very different from, I think, everyone else on this call, because it's always been tied to my work. It was never like my own passion project that I kind of did for myself. The reality of it is my students are the people that kind of inspire me on a daily basis. So the first time, I think this was 2013, I created a website. I was working in K-12, working at a high school as a college advisor. And I realized that, all of those kids were first gen, and it's information overload. College knowledge is information overload. Like, you can sit in an info session and they think they're being very helpful, and they are, but when you leave, it's so much to digest and remember. And and for my own personal sanity, those emails of things that I've already said a million times was just like, how can I create a space where all these questions you have, I can give you for free? And that's kind of been like how my work has flowed into the digital platforms, using a website and then using Instagram. And, now here we have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So, it's really been inspired by students and their questions and family members, and thinking about myself every time I'm trying to give information, like, how would I receive it? How would 17-year-old Simone receive it? Which, long time ago, but I do remember just not knowing so many different things, and how would I like to have that information given to me? So, and LT, same thing with Dr. Eve. I don't know how you manage it. Like, you you live in your first gen skin every day, and then you go out of your way to help other folks on a daily basis, in addition to your job and walking in your first gen life. I don't know to this day. I've worked very closely with you, and I don't know how you do it, but that's inspirational. Like, you know, it's nonstop with you, and you're really committed to making sure that people in all walks of life, not just students, not just colleagues from across the United States, but anyone you come in contact with, have the tools they need to succeed or to help others succeed. And that's inspirational within itself.